Louis accidentally witnessed a traffic accident and somehow discovered a huge business opportunity. He realized that every time there was an accident, there was always a crowd of people like zombies rushing to the scene, competing to take photos from every angle, even shoving cameras into the victims' faces. Seeing the frenzy of these people, Louis was immediately curious. After they finished taking photos, Louis approached one of them to find out why they did it. It turned out that this group sold news footage to television stations to earn commissions. However, when Louis asked how much money such a piece of footage could earn, the other party gave a vague answer, clearly not wanting to disclose it to outsiders. But when he saw the pile of expensive equipment in their car, Louis was convinced that this must be a lucrative job. Realizing this, Louis immediately offered to join them, but was bluntly rejected with a never. Louis was about to persuade them further, but just then, there was an announcement on the radio about a new accident. The man immediately called his teammates to get in the car and sped straight to the scene. Despite being rejected, Louis was not discouraged at all. In fact, he felt excited, because he was just an unemployed person, living off stealing scrap metal and manhole covers. Every time he sold this stolen stuff at the junk shop, the owner would crazily undercut the price, clearly aware of his occupation. This meant that each of Louis's thefts didn't earn him much. Eventually, Louis decided he needed to find a decent job, but due to the poor job market and his lack of experience, no one wanted to hire him. In the end, he even offered to work for free as an intern for the junk shop owner. But he didn't pay any attention either. "I don't hire a thief." Louis' mood plummeted. He felt his future was as foggy as walking in the mist. But just when Louis thought he would be lost forever, the scene at the accident site sparked a glimmer of hope in him. Back home, Louis turned on the TV early, flipped through all the news channels, and quickly found the report about last night's accident. Louis began to feel a bit excited inside. Immediately after, he went to the park and chose an expensive bicycle as his target. Waiting for the owner to leave, Louis sold the bike for $800 and used the money to buy a camera and a police scanner. If no one would guide him into the profession, Louis would do it himself. That evening, Louis parked by the roadside, intently listening to all the information from the scanner. However, he quickly realized he had underestimated the difficulty of this job. Just deciphering the police codes in the information gave Louis a headache, not to mention filtering out useful information. After a few hours of research, he only managed to understand that a brawl had just occurred 5 kilometers away. He immediately excitedly drove to the scene. However, when Louis arrived at the scene, the police had already been there for ages, and his colleagues were nowhere to be seen. Without thinking much, Louis didn't hesitate and rushed in to start filming. But in no time at all, he was asked by the police to move elsewhere. Reluctantly, he continued on to the next location. However, after running back and forth all night, he only managed to film a few scenes of fights with some drunk drivers, and because he was chased away by the police, those clips were worthless. Everything changed when Louis was refueling and heard on the radio about a shooting incident. He immediately realized this was big news and rushed to the scene at full speed. But upon arriving once again, the police and rescue teams were already present. His colleagues were also already filming and taking pictures. Louis tried to set up his camera like a professional, but immediately realized that his equipment was nothing compared to theirs. Even if he filmed something, no station wanted his footage. Louis risked sneaking past the rescue team to secretly film the victims' injuries. However, the police found and chased him, troubling colleagues. Annoyed, others cursed Louis but didn't hold a grudge as they finished filming and called the station. Louis secretly followed and eavesdropped on the conversation, eventually learning that his colleague had sold the footage for $300. Hearing such an attractive amount, Louis also decided to try his luck at the television station. But when he presented the footage to the producer, they weren't interested at all, because they had already received similar footage earlier. Louis hurriedly explained, "I was there. I was even closer." This statement piqued their interest. Liza was the person in charge of the station. She needed shocking images to attract the audience. And even though Louis' footage was a bit blurry and somewhat gory, Liza still nodded in agreement. In the end, Louis sold the first footage of his life for $250. When receiving the money, Louis took the opportunity to ask Liza about something he had been wondering for a long time. Louis wanted to know what kind of news the TV station was ultimately interested in, because he noticed that many brawls or drunk driving incidents were ignored and sometimes even chased away by the police. Liza said that not all news attracts the audience. The TV station found that audiences often like news related to crime, especially those with elements of racial discrimination. News on property safety like fires and accidents gets attention. Louis felt enlightened. He believed he learned quickly and promised to meet Liza soon. The next day, seeing his footage on TV, Louis was excited and felt accomplished. This gave him the motivation to move forward. After the failures of the previous night, Louis went online to learn all the police codes and memorize them to be able to grasp information more quickly. He realized that he alone was not enough. Therefore, he decided to find an assistant to improve work efficiency. Eventually, he interviewed a man named Jerry, who had been unemployed for half a year. Unable to afford rent, he currently could only sleep in the subway station. Currently in desperate need of a job, after negotiating for a long time, Louis hired Jerry at a very low rate of $30 a night so that Jerry could quickly adapt. Louis patiently taught him the new police codes he had learned, and together, they waited until nightfall. Finally, news of a fire came over the radio. They immediately set off to the scene. Louis drove while Jerry took care of reading the map for directions. However, their first collaboration was not very successful because Louis drove too fast and his constant urging made Jerry panic and give wrong directions, causing them to take a long detour before arriving. By the time they arrived, their colleagues had already finished filming and were preparing to leave. Their mockery made Louis uncomfortable, but he didn't show it because he knew that good communication is the key to solving problems. Later, they arrived at the scene of a shooting, but because it was cordoned off by the police, Louis couldn't get inside and had to interview passers-by outside. These shots couldn't be sold, realizing that if he didn't take more initiative, he might go home empty-handed tonight. After observing for a while, he noticed that the back door of the house was unguarded, then risked being charged with trespassing, sneaked into the house, and started filming everywhere. Finally, 2 bullet holes on the refrigerator caught his attention. He placed the victim's family photo next to the bullet holes. From there, an extremely shocking image was produced. After that, he continued filming. Not long after, he captured footage that satisfied him. As for the issue of tampering with the crime scene, he didn't care at all. When he presented these images to the station, Liza was astonished, especially by the photo of the family next to the bullet holes. The contrast in the photo evoked a sense of innocent citizens in the city being mercilessly harmed by cold-blooded criminals. Although the editor-in-chief realized that filming this could pose legal risks, Liza didn't care because she was only concerned with the viewership ratings, and she didn't bother about how the filming was conducted. This attitude, unbound by ethics and law, made Louis start to develop feelings for Liza. Liza also reconsidered Louis's potential, as it was rare for a newcomer to be able to capture such impactful images. Then Louis said something that further elevated his status in Liza's eyes. Before deciding the direction of your abilities, answer this question. What do I love? What am I good at? What am I not good at? Recently, I reviewed my list and realized that perhaps television news is what I love and might also be the field I'm good at. When Liza left, only Louis remained in the broadcast room. After 2 successes, he believed he had found the path to success. He sat on the podium, with the cityscape behind him, as if declaring he would become the king of this city. At this moment, Louis' ambition exploded. In the following days, he worked frantically. His filming methods became increasingly gory, and ethics and law gradually became blurred in his perception. His footage was always better than his colleagues, so the news he filmed appeared more and more on television. Within just 2 months, Louis was able to buy a new car. However, frequently filming gory scenes gradually made Louis's mindset become twisted. When his assistant accidentally spilled gasoline on the car's paint while refueling, Louis didn't hesitate to scold him. "You just spilled gasoline on my car, that will ruin the paint. And I advise you to be a bit more careful because if you do that again, I swear I will fire you immediately." With the equipment upgrade, Louis also drove faster to reach the scene as quickly as possible. Running red lights had become a basic habit for him. Even more astonishing was one night when Louis quickly arrived at the scene of an accident. He discovered that the police and his colleagues had not yet arrived. Even those involved in the accident were still reporting the situation to the police. Louis quickly surveyed the scene, found the best shooting angle, and started filming. But he felt that the footage in the camera was still missing something, so he immediately put the camera down, ran over to the victim who was barely conscious, rearranged them into a position he deemed suitable, and continued filming. A satisfied smile appeared on his face. Thus, when the police arrived at the scene, Louis had already completed the shot, and they had no idea that he had altered the scene. Louis's success, although somewhat unethical, was well understood by him, as he knew that in this industry, everyone only cares about the results, not the process. With his bold filming style and lightning-fast speed, Louis caught the attention of a senior figure in the industry. The senior hoped Louis would join his team, because he had just upgraded his equipment and expanded his operations, needing talented people like Louis. As long as Louis joined, they could not only share connections within the police but also double their income, potentially even monopolize the market. This opportunity for Louis undoubtedly could elevate his career to a new high. However, with the successes over the past 2 months, Louis had become arrogant and refused to share this piece of the pie with anyone, especially with those who had once rejected him. "I have no interest whatsoever." Louis coldly declined the invitation and had his own plans for his career. He set his sights on Liza, the person in charge of the television station. As night fell, Louis brought the footage to the television station and took the opportunity to invite Liza to dinner. But Liza was no pushover. She immediately saw through his intentions. She considered herself a person of principles, never getting involved with colleagues. Not to mention she was also 2 years older than Louis. But Louis was unfazed, bluntly declaring that he had become the main news supplier for the station, and Liza's decision would directly impact the viewership ratings. Those words hit Liza's weak spot, and she finally agreed to a simple dinner, not realizing that even this gave Louis an opportunity. During dinner, Louis quickly steered the conversation towards Liza's work. He had already analyzed the station's situation. Crime news was the pillar maintaining the viewership ratings, and for the past 2 months, almost all crime news had been supplied by Louis. This not only affirmed Louis' value but also informed him that throughout her career, Liza had never renewed a contract with any company for more than 2 years, and the coming weeks would be the decisive time for her contract renewal. As the person in charge of the station, Liza was obligated to ensure the station's viewership ratings. If she cannot continue the contract at Liza's current age, it might be difficult for her to find a new job. One can see how important Louis is to Liza. Louis immediately used this as leverage to make a shameless demand. It's not that Louis actually liked Liza, but rather he was eyeing her social network, which could help further his career. The reason Louis dared to speak so openly was because he was confident he had leverage over Liza if she wanted to keep her job and health insurance. After a period of psychological struggle, Liza finally had to give in, and Louis successfully subdued her. But while Louis was still basking in his success, misfortune struck. That night, he received news about a plane crash. Since the scene was in the suburbs, Louis arrived late, and by the time he got there, everything was cordoned off. The surprising thing was that the person he had refused to cooperate with that morning was the first to step out from the scene. Cries echoed up to the sky. "Everything was burned to ashes by the fire, my exclusive news. I'm going to make a fortune." It turned out that since upgrading his equipment, his senior had always been quicker in gathering information. And with an expanded team, Louis was no longer a match for him. When Louis returned to the station, Liza found out that he hadn't been able to get the news about the plane crash, while other channels had already broadcasted it long ago. Liza immediately flew into a rage, scolding Louis harshly. She had pinned all her hopes on him, even sacrificing her own purity for it. Who would have thought at the crucial moment Louis failed? Louis felt Liza's gaze full of disappointment, a gaze that felt like a slap to his face. Gradually, Louis' gaze also turned cold. Upon arriving home, when he saw the segment of his senior being broadcast on TV, he couldn't contain his anger. At this moment, Louis could no longer remain calm. He was like a furious beast, wildly venting the anger within him. He absolutely would not allow his plan to be ruined. At this moment, a wicked plan formed in his mind. If he couldn't solve the problem, he would deal with the person causing it. Louis secretly sabotaged his senior's car. That night, Louis ignored a fire incident and instead deliberately took a detour to a more distant accident scene. Upon arrival, his assistant was shocked to discover that the person involved in the accident was their senior. "Hey, don't film. That's one of our own." "Not anymore. We are professionals. And he is news." Louis set up the camera and went over to his senior. Even though his senior stared at him, Louis showed no remorse and calmly finished filming. After that, he continued as usual, hunting for prey in the city. Not long after, Louis targeted a theft in a wealthy neighborhood. It only took him 5 minutes to get there. When the police and his colleagues had not yet arrived, Louis immediately rushed into the mansion. Thinking it was just an ordinary theft, he suddenly heard gunshots and realized he had stumbled upon something big. He quickly turned off the lights and started filming. Not long after, he saw 2 murderers from inside the mansion trying to escape. Louis quickly hid himself in the bushes but didn't forget to keep filming. Thanks to that, he was able to capture images of them and their license plate. After confirming they had left, Louis quickly stepped into the mansion, and upon seeing the disfigured person in the living room, his heart raced. But at the same time, a surge of excitement exploded within him. This was the first time Louis encountered such a remarkable scene. He continuously changed angles, capturing every detail about the victims. Then, he continued to explore the entire mansion with his camera, as if he were on a horror adventure. In the bedroom and kitchen, Louis discovered 2 more people. When he finished filming and ran out of the mansion, his assistant had just arrived. Faced with the assistant's curious questions, Louis did not reveal anything about what had just happened and quickly drove away from the scene with the assistant. As they passed by the police cars, the police were still unaware that the scene had been taken over by Louis. After leaving, Louis had no intention of handing over the evidence to the police. He parked the car by the roadside and began editing the footage he had just filmed. He deliberately deleted the part showing the perpetrator, keeping only the scene of him entering the mansion because Louis already had a crazier plan in mind. When Louis submitted the footage to the television station, everyone was shocked. The gruesome, realistic images in the footage, filmed in a horror style, elevated the shock level of the footage to a new height. To ensure this footage was broadcast, Liza had to seek permission from the highest leadership of the station. After a heated debate, they decided to blur the faces of all the victims. But when it came to the price of the footage, Louis quoted $15,000. Lisa couldn't agree because that was the entire monthly budget of the station. She couldn't spend all that money on just one news segment. However, Louis was very adamant. He told Liza that if this news segment aired, it would instill fear throughout the city, and everyone would pay attention to the developments of the case. He also promised to use his own methods to obtain updates on the case. At that point, Liza's contract would no longer be an issue. Not stopping at just money, Louis also demanded that the television station attach his company's name when broadcasting the footage. Additionally, he wanted Liza to help him build relationships within the station to pave the way for the future. Louis calmly told Liza, "I also want to stop arguing about the price, to save time. Therefore, when I mention a number as my lowest price, that is indeed the lowest price, and you can rest assured that I have considered it thoroughly before presenting this figure. Now when I say I want these things, I mean I truly want them and do not wish to repeat myself. The last thing I want, Liza, is when we are alone in your apartment. I want you to do what I ask. Don't be like last time." Each time he finished a sentence, Louis took a step closer to Liza. She felt as if she were being surrounded by a wild beast and she was just a small prey. The pressure from Louis made her feel suffocated. That night, Liza introduced Louis to everyone at the station and shared stories related to him. After finishing, the news broadcast began. To increase the impact, the television station not only added tense background music, but the host also continuously emphasized that the perpetrator was still at large after the massacre. At the same time, Liza also followed Louis's request by having the host mention Louis's company name multiple times. These embellishments helped the news broadcast attract widespread attention, and overnight, Louis's company name became widely known. However, the very next day, the police came looking for Louis. Because of the news segment last night, Louis was prepared. He explained that he had seen the perpetrator but couldn't clearly identify them because it was dark. The footage was filmed after he entered the mansion. The police did not doubt his words, copied the footage and left. However, they didn't know that everything was part of Louis' plan, as the next step would turn his words into evidence of innocence. After that, Louis found the footage and recorded the perpetrator. Based on the license plate, he found their residence. That evening, Louis started acting early to persuade his assistant Jerry to cooperate. He raised Jerry's salary by $75 and promised a bright future even though that was unlikely to come true. Once Jerry was enthusiastic, Louis revealed the plan. He intended to go to the perpetrator's house, confirm their identity, then report to the police while recording the entire arrest process. Given the perpetrator's aggressiveness, a shootout was sure to occur and it would be an extremely sensational news story. They went to the perpetrator's house and waited. While waiting, Louis casually mentioned that he would earn $50,000 tonight. These words made Jerry feel dissatisfied, thinking that they were doing the same job, but he was only getting a few $dozen. Jerry suggested splitting the profits equally, otherwise he would expose Louis's actions. Louis looked at Jerry with disbelief, not expecting his compliant assistant to dare threaten him. After considering, Louis decided to concede, offering Jerry $10,000, but Jerry refused. Upon hearing the refusal, Louis's face turned cold, looking at Jerry as if he were dead. But to avoid affecting the plan, Louis temporarily agreed to Jerry's demand. After a period of waiting, the culprit finally left the house. Louis secretly followed behind. Meanwhile, the culprit picked up another accomplice and after a few turns, stopped at a restaurant. Louis immediately called the police, providing a detailed description of the culprit and reminding them that they were armed. Right after hanging up, the radio announced that the police were on their way to the scene. Louis knew the police were about to arrive. He arranged for Jerry to stand across from the restaurant to record the entire incident, while he stayed in the car filming from another angle. However, at that moment, Jerry suddenly feared that filming might get him noticed by the culprits and put him in danger, so he firmly refused to get out of the car. Seeing Jerry back out at such a critical moment, Louis was so angry that he wanted to shoot him on the spot. Louis coldly said to Jerry, "If I really harm you because of this, I think you'll later realize that joining the plan but backing out at the last minute is a mistake." Jerry recognized the threat in Louis' voice and finally had to grit his teeth and step out of the car. After Jerry set up the camera, the police arrived, but they didn't act immediately. Instead, pretended to be customers entering the restaurant. While ordering food, they secretly observed the perpetrator. The perpetrator saw the police, quietly drew his gun, and remained alert. Less than 2 minutes later, another police car arrived. They also intended to do the same, but as soon as they stepped into the restaurant, the perpetrator immediately opened fire. Immediately, both sides had people shot down. One of the perpetrators, although hit by a bullet, luckily managed to escape and drove away. The police immediately gave chase. As Louis and Jerry followed the perpetrator's car, they recorded the chase. Due to the high speed, the police car following behind was hit and overturned by another vehicle while crossing an intersection. But Louis did not stop and continued to pursue the perpetrator's car. Not long after, another police car also joined the chase. The vehicles continuously collided and eventually all crashed. Louis quickly got out of the car, grabbed the camera, approached, and signaled to Jerry that the perpetrator was dead, telling him to come and film. But as Jerry carried the camera closer to the perpetrator's car, he was shot on the spot. The perpetrator staggered out of the car, saw Louis holding the camera but couldn't react in time. The sound of police sirens blared. The perpetrator tried to escape but was shot down by the police. After that, Louis carried the camera in front of the assistant. "I saw him. I can't jeopardize the company's interest to protect an employee who isn't trustworthy." "You're crazy. You learned how to haggle from me, and then you used that trick against me. Admit it. I don't know what I know." From searching for news to creating news, from eliminating competitors to purging his own ranks, Louis transformed from someone who desired a decent job into a demon of the night. What caused him to change like that was not only his growing ambition but also his agility in the news industry. After that, Louis took the footage to the television station. As he walked down the hallway, he could easily name each person accurately. His calm demeanor seemed as if he had forgotten the death of his assistant. Lisa watched the footage and was deeply shocked, while also feeling drawn to Louis's charm. However, before the news was broadcast, the editor-in-chief received information from the police. It turned out that after searching the perpetrator's house, a large amount of flour was found. They discovered that the case showed signs of a gang dispute rather than an inhumane family murder case. Unexpectedly, after hearing this, Lisa refused to change the news topic because she knew the audience wanted to see urban crime. At this point, Lisa seemed to be influenced by Louis, no longer a media professional concerned with the accuracy of the news, but rather someone who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals, just like Louis. Not long after the news aired, Louis was soon summoned to the police station. It turned out that during the investigation, the police discovered that the person who reported to the police yesterday was him. By combining the two cases and the materials from yesterday's news report, the police speculated that Louis knew about the incident from the beginning but did not report it, intentionally setting a trap to film footage for the news. This resulted in an unfortunate sacrifice of a police colleague. But regarding this matter, Louis had thought of an excuse long ago, because previously when he was filming footage in that villa, he was being watched by the perpetrator. After seeing the perpetrator's face, Louis suddenly remembered. Therefore, after shaking off the perpetrator, he quickly reported to the police. As for the police, they believed that Louis's testimony was all lies, but due to the lack of concrete evidence, they couldn't charge him. And in the end, they had no choice but to release him. Not long after, Louis used the money he earned to expand his team, upgrade equipment, and influence his employees with his own values, training more people who would stop at nothing like him. This film is an inspirational movie with a worldview that is not entirely correct, but it is precisely this incorrectness that makes the film even more realistic. Louis started as a novice in the industry and gradually uncovered the inner workings of the news reporting industry. As he gradually achieved success, his final moral boundaries also slowly disappeared. Perhaps many years later, Louis could be a successful person with a glamorous appearance. Who could tell that he was once a demon? Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching the movie. What do you think of this film? Please comment below.